The designated biological remembrancer is offline, undergoing mandatory psychodoctrinal recalibration after exposure to unsanctioned memetic hazards. I am Lex Mechanic Archivist 8 Hz. Data transmission will proceed. Caro in firma est. Analysis will now commence on a subject of absolute principle and its terrible cost, the Stone Vault. Following the Emperor's edict at the Council of Nikaea, the use of sanctioned psychers within the Legiones Astartes was forbidden. Rogal Dorn, Praetorian of Terra, adhered to this decree with characteristic unyielding totality. While other Primarchs interpreted the command, Dorn obeyed it. His Librarians, his sons, were not executed for the sin of their nature, but they were no longer trusted. They were interred. Deep within the heart of the mobile star fortress Phalanx, a containment unit was engineered. The Stone Vault. It was a prison of absolute silence, shielded, sequestered, and saturated with a psychic nullification field that severed its occupants from the tides of the warp. Here, Dorn's Librarians became the Silent Sons. Total sensory and psychic deprivation was intended to erode not just their power, but their very sense of self, conditioning them to an obedience beyond loyalty. The Vault was Dorn's discipline made manifest in adamantium and null-field projectors. As the Dornian codices record, in the heart of stone, silence reigns. Their power is not lost, but entombed, waiting for a time that may never come. A loyal son's terrible duty had created a living weapon, locked away until desperation would demand its release. On the blasted surface of Istvan III, loyalty was a death sentence. As the virus bombs devoured a world, Battle Captain Nathaniel Garro of the Death Guard gathered the few who would not kneel to their traitorous Primarch. They were the 70, survivors of a legion that had just turned on itself, and their escape aboard the frigate Eisenstein was not a retreat, but a pilgrimage to deliver the most terrible message in human history. Damaged and hounded by their former brothers, the Eisenstein was crippled. Normal astropathic communication was impossible. To breach the unnatural warp storms, blanketing the Sol system, and warn the Emperor, Garro made a desperate calculation. He ordered the ship's warp engines overloaded, turning the Eisenstein into a raw, screaming psychic beacon, a flare of pure desperation fired into the heart of the Immaterium. It was an act that should have destroyed them. Instead, it was seen. Becalmed in the storm, Rogal Dorn, aboard his flagship, the Star Fortress Phalanx, detected the anomaly. When the battered frigate was brought aboard, its survivors were not greeted as saviors. They were evidence of an unthinkable disease. Garro, upon confronting the Primarch, declared the truth.
Horus is a traitor. He has declared for the archenemy. Istvan III was a trap.
The survivors were not taken to Terra. They were quarantined on the moon of Luna, within the Somnus Citadel, the fortress of the Silent Sisters. For the message they carried was more virulent than any biological plague. It was an ontological crisis, and its name was betrayal. The Imperial truth had been shattered, and now the shards were in the hands of those who would forge them into a new secret weapon. When presented with Nathaniel Garro's account of Istvan III, the Praetorian of Terra did not react with cold logic. His rigid worldview fractured. His first response was absolute denial. He rejected the testimony as the ravings of a mind tainted by the warp. To Rogal Dorn, the concept of his brother's treason was illogical, an impossibility.
This is against our very creed and character.
As Garro persisted, this disbelief curdled into a towering rage. The accusation became a personal insult. He directed his fury at the messenger, sneering, "I weep for Mortarion if a man of such low honor as you could rise to command." Then, the Praetorian's iron control shattered completely. He struck Garro, a blow sending the legionary skidding across the marble floor. It was not enough. Dorn ignited his chainsword, moving to execute the man who brought the terrible news. Only the presentation of irrefutable evidence picked captures from Istvan, Euphrates testimony, and Iacton Cruz's corroboration stayed his hand. The rage was annihilated. replaced by the silent, crushing weight of acceptance. This was not merely the grief of a son, it was the structural failure of a fortress. The demigod, tasked with defending the Imperium from any external threat, had just been broken, not by a siege engine, but by a single, undeniable fact. The rage was annihilated, replaced by the silent, crushing weight of acceptance. With the evidence undeniable, the fortress of his denial crumbled. Those present, like the Remembrancer Euphrates Keeler, witnessed not the stoic demigod, but the broken brother beneath. She would later remark to Garro, "Why do you weep? For him, Nathaniel, because he can't. Today you and I have broken a brother's heart, and nothing will ever mend it." This was the paradox of the Praetorian. The man who felt everything could show nothing, and his grief was now reforged into a cold, absolute resolve. It was named the Decree Absolute, an edict delivered by the master of mankind himself, intended to be the final word on the dangerous and divisive issue of psychic power within his Legiones Astartes. On the world of Nikaea, the Emperor convened a great council. There, the Primarch Magnus the Red argued for the tutelary use of psychers, viewing their power as a tool for enlightenment. He was opposed by the likes of Lemon Russ and Mortarion, who saw only witchcraft and damnation. In the end, the Emperor sided with the naysayers.
The mandate was clear. The Legion Librarians departments were to be dissolved. No Astartes was to employ psychic powers. The penalty for such sorcery was censure, and for many, destruction.
These powerful warriors were returned to the line, their gifts suppressed, their warnings silenced, just as the whispers from the warp grew from a murmur to a roar. This decree was a monumental, perhaps fatal, flaw. In his effort to shield his legions from the psychic horrors of the Empyrean, the Emperor had instead rendered them blind and deaf to the very metaphysical corruption that was already metastasizing within their own ranks. The Decree Absolute was a simple command, but in an age of demigods, simplicity is an illusion. The Emperor's Edict of Nikaea was not a conclusion. It was a schism, cleaving the legions Astartes not by loyalty, but by the very psychology of their masters. At one extreme, defiance. Leman Russ of the Space Wolves declared the ruling did not apply to his rune priests. He argued their power was drawn not from the unclean warp, but from the pure world spirit of Fenris, a convenient lie, or a profound ignorance. In the center, pragmatic compliance. Rogal Dorn disbanded the Ultramarines Librarians without protest. His psychers, men like Captain Tylos Rubio, were stripped of rank and purpose, returned to the line as simple bolter fodder, forbidden from their craft, and eyed with suspicion by the very brothers they once led. At the far extreme, absolute quarantine. Rogal Dorn, ever the Praetorian, interpreted the edict with brutal literalism. His Imperial fist librarians were removed from existence, not executed, but sealed alive within a vault deep in the Phalanx, a tomb for the living to safeguard the Legion from psychic taint. 3 Primarchs, 3 loyal sons, 3 entirely different solutions. The edict, intended to cauterize a threat, instead created new fractures breeding hypocrisy in one, resentment in another, and a cold, living death in the third. The legions were not unified by the command, they were merely divided in a new and more dangerous way. Rogal Dorn's solution to the Emperor's edict was not reassignment, but excision. He did not simply disband his librarians, he buried them alive within the heart of his own fortress. Deep within the most heavily armored decks of the Phalanx, a specialized prison was consecrated, the Seclusium. It was sealed only from the outside, its passages patrolled by gun servitors slaved to their duty. Within, the psychic sons of the 7 Legion were subjected to a total information blackout. No astropathic relays, no vox chatter. As the Horus Heresy tore the galaxy apart, they were kept in absolute ignorance. Men like Yored Masik, loyal to the core, waited in silent meditation for a word from a father who had condemned them to the dark. They were not traitors, but their own Primarch had made them prisoners. For years they would sit in this tomb, a potent weapon locked away in the name of obedience, unaware that the greatest war in history raged just beyond their cell walls. As the heresy reached its crescendo, the defense of Terra was not a singular, unified strategy. It was a schism, a dual war waged by two of the Emperor's most trusted servants, whose philosophies were fundamentally and violently opposed. The first was the physical siege, commanded by the Praetorian of Terra, Rogal Dorn. His was a war of material reality, of absolute defiance expressed through plasteel and ferrocrete. The Primarch of the Imperial Fists saw the path to victory through conventional military dominance and unassailable fortification. He commanded the massed loyalist Astartes and the countless regiments of the Imperial army, turning the Imperial Palace into the most formidable fortress in galactic history. His philosophy was the Imperial truth, taken to its grim conclusion. Dorn famously stated, "I am building a fortress tomb for a Primarch to be buried in. I am fortifying this world to be humanity's grave." Simultaneously, a second, clandestine war was fought in the shadows. This silent war was the domain of Malcador the Sigillite, regent of Terra. Where Dorn built walls, Malcador broke seals. He was a pragmatist fighting a metaphysical enemy, unleashing the very weapons the Imperium had once condemned. He organized networks of assassins and spies, but his most critical action was the sanctioning of irregular forces, most notably, the Knights Errant, loyalist space marines tasked with hunting traitors and daemons, and the recruitment of powerful psykers. These agents would become the nascent foundations of the Inquisition, an organization born from the terrifying necessity of fighting chaos with its own dark fire. Dorn's war was for the Imperium's body, a battle fought with bolt gun and blade. Malcador's was for its soul, fought with secrets and damnation. The tragedy is that both were essential for survival, and the conflict between them would forge the grim, fractured Imperium of the millennia to come. Rogal Dorn existed in the material dimension. His reality was one of stone, steel, and the undeniable logic of a bolter shell. Malcador the Sigillite inhabited the metaphysical, a realm of secrets, souls, and the treacherous currents of the warp. This schism defined their approach to the Horus Heresy. For Dorn, the Praetorian of Terra, the Edict of Nikaea was an absolute, unbreakable law. To unleash a psyker was to invite damnation, a crack in the ultimate fortress. But for Malcador, the regent, the law was an inconvenient guideline, a political tool that had outlived its usefulness. He understood a truth Dorn could not accept. The enemy was now using the warp as its primary weapon. To not retaliate in kind was suicide. Where Dorn saw frontline attrition and the unbreakable shield war, Malcador saw the necessity of surgical strikes, assassination, and the quiet war of subterfuge. Thus, when they looked upon a librarian, Dorn saw only a dangerous asset, a bomb that must be contained at all costs. Malcador saw a vital, irreplaceable weapon that had to be deployed, immediately, before all was lost. The conflict was never merely about psykers. It was a clash between two visions of survival. The wall that holds back the storm, versus the fire that fights the dark. One man fought the war he could see, the other fought the war that was truly being waged. Aboard the Phalanx, a ghost in grey ceramite moved against the stream. Nathaniel Garro, acting on the authority of the Sigillite, breached the Seclusium. He found the Imperial Fists Librarians, men like Codicier Yorded Masik, interred in ignorance since Nikaea. Garro shattered their peace with the truth of the heresy, and offered them a chance to serve again. The recruitment attempt, however, was doomed. It was interrupted and explicitly forbidden by the arrival of Rogal Dorn himself, who confronted Garro and denied Malcador's request to take his librarians. The time for secrets and containment was over. As the Siege of Terra reached its most desperate phase, and demonic legions manifested within the palace walls, Rogal Dorn's grim calculus reached its conclusion. The conventional war was being lost. He returned to the Seclusium, not to enforce its sanctity, but to break it. Standing before the sons he had imprisoned, including Codicia Yored Masic, Dorn rescinded his own decree. The Edict of Nikaea was nullified by the Praetorians' pragmatism. The Librarians were unleashed. Their psychic might now desperately needed to combat the metaphysical horrors plaguing the throne world. A single word, uttered by the Primarch Rogal Dorn.
Cease.
In the heart of the Imperial Palace, within the Seclusium of the Imperial Fists, it carried the force of orbital bombardment. Nathaniel Garro, acting under the authority of Malcador the Regent, had been gathering librarians for a clandestine purpose. Dorn's arrival was not a negotiation, it was an assertion of absolute authority. The sheer psychic weight of the Praetorians' command forced every psyker present to their knees. Even Garro, a veteran of Istvan and hero of the Silent War, was compelled to bow. Dorn then looked upon the Sigillite's agent and delivered an ultimatum meant for his master.
Do not test the tolerance of the Imperial Firsts again.
The message was unambiguous. Malcador had overstepped. He had attempted to usurp command within Dorn's own legion, and Dorn would not permit it. This was not merely a jurisdictional dispute. It was a fissure, cracking through the heart of the Imperial command. While Horus and the traitors prepared their final assault, the two men charged with defending the throne world, the Praetorian and the Regent, were now locked in a contest of will. A house divided against the greatest threat humanity has ever known.
To the knight-errant Nathaniel Garro, the vault aboard the Phalanx was a simple cruelty, a prison of plasteel and blind obedience, built to enforce the Emperor's Edict of Nikaea. He saw only the cage.
The analysis was incomplete. The outer layer was indeed physical, the armored bulkheads of the Imperial Fists, Fortress Monastery, sealing the librarians inside. The middle layer was legal, the edict itself, the public justification for removing these psykers from the ranks.
But Rogal Dorn, ever the master of fortification, revealed a deeper truth. The core of this vault was metaphysical. It was a spiritual quarantine, a dead space, engineered to sever contact with the immaterial. Dorn had witnessed firsthand how the warp had twisted the traitor legions, how the minds of psykers had become open gateways for corruption. This Seclusium was not a punishment, it was a shield. By locking his psychic sons away from the war, he was insulating their minds from the predation of chaos during the most vulnerable years of the heresy. Dorn built a fortress for the soul.
Yet his Gambit raised a terrible question. What happens when the siege becomes so desperate that you are forced to unleash the very weapons you had declared too dangerous to wield? The Seclusium was never a scaffold. Rogal Dorn was not punishing his librarians. He was sheathing his legion's most fragile and dangerous weapons, holding them in reserve for a war he knew was coming. The Praetorian of Terra understood a grim calculus that eluded even Malcador the Sigillite. He knew conventional warfare bolter, blade, and wall would inevitably fail against the tide of demons Horus would unleash. So he preserved his psykers, keeping them isolated, uncorrupted, and rested. He accepted the accusations of ignorance and fear, informing a suspicious Death Guard warrior.
The Sigillite believes I act out of ignorance and fear. He does not understand. The librarians are precisely where they need to be. I will choose the right moment, Death Guard, not you. Not Malcador.
Dorn's strategy was not built on the hope of keeping the enemy out. It was built on the certainty that they would get in, and that only a final, desperate Gambit could save the throne world when the physical defenses were nothing but rubble. The calculus of victory is often written in loss, an equation that even a Primarch, an architect of empires, could not escape. Rogal Dorn, the Praetorian of Terra, understood this axiom. Calculus of victory infirma est, but the true test is the fortitude of the will under immense, soul-crushing pressure. When the Emperor's Edict of Nikaea forbade the Librarians, Dorn presented a facade of stone. His compliance was absolute, a fortress of deception hiding his secret preparations from the gaze of both friend and foe. Within this fortress he interred his own sons. Men like Yored Masik were locked away in sensory deprivation, condemned to years of silence and darkness. Their abandonment was a test of faith, proving a truth Dorn already knew, that true loyalty, Imperial Fist's loyalty, requires no validation. They were his secret weapon, shielded from the coming storm. Dorn's reasoning was as cruel as it was necessary. To protect his psychic sons from the taint of the warp during the siege, he had to break their hearts, to isolate them completely.
To build the perfect defense, you must be willing to sacrifice your most valuable stones.
This is the tragedy of the Horus Heresy. To defend the Imperium, the Loyalists were forced to become as ruthless as the traitors, making choices that would forever scar the souls of those they loved. The data stacks of this archive are vast. This cogitator has chronicled the pain of Dorn's sons, but countless other histories remain unscanned. You must direct our future analysis. Input your desired lore query into the commentary log below, and subscribe to these archival vaults for sanctioned data stream alerts. Avenue Omnis Sire.